Good afternoon to one and all. I'm Selva Prabhu, Training Manager for WAN-IFRA South Asia. I'll be the organizer for the webinar for the next 1 hour. Hope all can hear me. And WAN-IFRA welcomes you for the second webinar for the benefit of news industry professionals. The webinars are basically conceptualized to give a quick update on business and technology related topics. And the topic is Grow Green. And we all know that going green has been synonymous with corporate social responsibility actions for publishing houses. However, there is also a clear economic benefit. This 1 hour webinar will give introduction to green publishing on how does it work, what are the environmental impact of a printing plant, and what are the systems to be established to go green, and how much cost can be saved. So for this we have Anand Srinivasan. Anand is responsible for the activities of WAN-IFRA RMTC, and over the last 5 years with WAN-IFRA he has published several research reports on topics of materials and color reproduction. So his area of specializations include quality control, measurement tools, print process, newsprint and newsstick standardization, and 3D printing. So I request the participants to type the questions in their questions window so that we don't have any disturbances, external noises. So I just switch over to Anand to take care of the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Very good afternoon. A very good afternoon, one and all. I welcome you for the second webinar from WAN-IFRA South Asia, and I'm sure many of you have attended our first webinar on ISO 12647-3, and this is the second webinar on Grow Green. I'm sure you all appreciate that print today is attacked by several green arguments. You'd remember that a few years back, I say 3 years back, Abhishek Bachchan came in this advertisement of Idea Cellular, where Abhishek Bachchan came as a tree and then he said a lot of forests are cut for manufacturing paper and in turn for print. So this is a perspective that the telecom industry want to project for about the print industry. And it's quite understandable because the telecom sector wants to promote their mobile data services, and obviously when you say mobile data services, it also means several things that are printed like books, newspapers, magazines, etc., all going to a digital era. So that's an advertisement from Idea Cellular. And people believe this advertisement that forest has been cut to manufacture paper. You go to YouTube and search for this advertisement, and in the comments column you could see thousands of comments in support of electronic media and against print media. And later in my presentation I'll tell you why this is not true, why forest is print is not related to deforestation. We are not destroying forests. I'll come to it a little later in my presentation. So the normal viewpoint among people right now is that reading in electronic devices, when I say electronic devices, it can be a computer, it can be a tablet, it can be a mobile phone. So the general perception is that reading in electronic media is greener compared to reading in print media. That's one point. The second point is that the whole world is focusing on emissions and climate change. you would have heard about the Kyoto Protocol, Copenhagen Accord, etc., where all the countries in the world are really concerned about the global temperature increase that is happening. When you say temperature increase, there is a comparison that is made between pre-industrial era and the current era. When you say pre-industrial era, it's somewhere in the late 17th century, after 1750s, where the pre-industrial era, where there was no industries prior to 1750s, but after that all industries came into existence. If you look at the global temperature rise, we are talking about minute rises, but that has catastrophic effect. From the pre-industrial era, the global temperature rise is somewhere around 0.85 degrees Celsius, right? 0.85 degrees Celsius. And the world is expecting that if the industrial growth happens as it is happening in the current rate, then we are looking at overtaking a temperature increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. It is a 1.5 degrees Celsius higher temperature compared to the pre-industrial era, that is in the middle of 17th century. So we are looking at a 1.5 degree increase in temperature, which will bring catastrophic effect. So the first global countries, they joined together for the Kyoto Protocol, which was established in 1997, and it came into force in 2005. The Kyoto Protocol, it agreed that developed nations are responsible for the problems of temperature rise that we are facing right now. It is true. With all the developed countries who started their industrial revolution from the 17th century are all well developed right now, but they have emitted so much of carbon dioxide already into the atmosphere. So they are responsible for the temperature rise. So the Kyoto Protocol put a lot of emphasis on the developed nations to cut down their carbon emissions. But this protocol, the Kyoto Protocol, was not very successful because most of the developed nations, they wanted developing nations also to take more responsibility when it comes to emissions and temperature rise. So this Kyoto Protocol is, I could say, it is not very successful. And recently, in 2009, there was another meeting happened in Copenhagen. It's called Copenhagen Accord. I'm sure you all would have heard about it because we had a huge uproar in India after this Copenhagen Accord, where all the opposing parties were not happy with the view that India has taken in the Copenhagen Accord. And what stand that India took is that India, along with other developing nations, particularly China, they announced that they will take a voluntary step to reduce their carbon emissions. So what is the decision taken is that China said by the end of year 2020, they will cut their carbon intensity. That's a word to note. Carbon intensity is not carbon emission, it's carbon intensity. So China said they will cut their carbon intensity by 40 to 45%, and India said they will cut their carbon intensity somewhere between 20 to 25% by the year 2020. What is carbon intensity? So let's say today I require 1 unit of electricity to produce 100 copies. Right? I'm just giving an example. The numbers has no significance, right? And I require 1 unit of electricity to produce 100 copies. Then by the year of 2020, I should be producing the same 100 copies with only 0.75 units of electricity. That is 25% cut in the carbon intensity. The carbon emissions will not reduce. It will only keep on increasing because as our country develop, the country can develop only when our industries develop, which means our output increases. So as the output increases, the carbon emission is going to increase. But what we have committed is that we will reduce our carbon intensity by efficient processes, reducing our energy consumption, reducing our fuel consumption, etc. by a level of 25%, so that for the same amount of emissions, we will produce more products. That's the idea. So what it implies is that every industry in India at some point of time will be told by the government to reduce our carbon intensity. So we have to definitely reduce our consumption of energy and consumption of fuel and also consumption of raw materials. So we have to reduce our consumption, but we cannot reduce our output, of course. So reduce the consumption but maintain the output. That's the basic idea. And also we are also facing some tough environmental regulations. Maybe some of you may be aware of that. 2 years back, SEBI, our SEBI in Mumbai. So SEBI came up with a regulation that the top 100 listed companies, in terms of their capital, the top 100 companies, along with their annual report, they should also submit an annual sustainability report. So they said any industry has a commitment to their shareholders, and they also have a commitment to the environment or the surroundings in which it operates. So that's a key point. So SEBI said the top 100 listed companies has to submit their sustainability report. So today it can be the top 100 companies, and tomorrow it can be all listed companies. And sometime later it can be all companies who have to submit such a report. So it's going to be crucial that we take environmental initiatives right now and not delay it later. And you'll also appreciate that when you are any printing plant has to satisfy several legal requirements under different acts, particularly the Water Act, which specifies several parameters for our effluents, the industrial effluents, our sewage effluents. So they have to satisfy certain criteria. We cannot just let it on the drain. We have to treat it. We have to bring the parameters to a certain point, and then only we can leave it to the environment. So there is a Water Act. There is an Air Act that specifies what should be the noise level of your DG sets, how much decibels of noise can come out of your printing plants, etc. It has different specifications for daytime, nighttime, etc. And there is a specification for the composition of fumes that comes out of your DG sets, heats and dryers, etc. So, and also there is a hazardous waste rule. There are certain rules that says what you should do with your discarded dumps, all the waste and residues that you produce, and how prepared are you in case of an accident that has a potential to pollute the environment particularly. So though the public perception is against print, WAN-IFRA did a research study in 2013, and we published a report called Carbon Footprint on News Publishing, where WAN-IFRA analyzed the carbon emissions across the news publishing industry in different countries. We found that print is not as bad as it's being perceived right now. But however, for us the problem is public perception is very crucial. If people today decides that print is polluting the environment, I will not buy a printed newspaper, then we are in trouble. So it is very important for us to improve this public perception, which is currently not so good against printed newspaper. And secondly, the green initiatives which you take today will also going to save you a lot of cost. We'll see about it a little later. Right. So before we take any initiatives, any green initiatives, we should know exactly how does our activities is affecting the environment. Now that is a key question. Unless you know how you are affecting the environment, you cannot take initiatives to prevent that. So how does our activities affect the environment? So this is a flow chart of all our operations. So what are our operations basically? First we need raw materials, and where does the raw material comes from? Mainly paper. It comes from paper manufacturing industry. Right? We start here. There is a paper manufacturing industry. First there is a pulp manufacturing, paper manufacturing, and the paper is transported in trucks or in ship to the printing plants. And then there is chemicals, plates, inks, which are the other important raw materials. So it has to be transported to the printing plant. Right? That's the raw material. Then our editors and journalists, they use computers, which means they use energy to produce editorial content, and that has to come into the printing plant. And once everything is there, we have to print. So when we print, we use all these raw materials, and in turn, we produce printed products plus a lot of waste. Right? There is a lot of liquid waste, there are solid waste. So what do we do with the waste? There are recyclable waste, non-recyclable waste. So what are we doing with that? So that is the printing plant. And once the printing is completed, we have printed products, and that is taken in trucks for distribution and delivery. Or if you are a book manufacturer, if you produce books, it goes to retailers and then it goes to end use. So it reaches our customer, right? It reaches our customer. So after the end of the day, what does the customer do? He sells it to a waste paper collector. Now this waste paper collector sends it for, it can go back, for paper recycling and pulp manufacturing. But in India, the paper recycling is actually poor. We have only, let's say, 35 to 40% of waste paper are recycled. The rest are not recycled. Where does it go? It goes to grocery shops, restaurants. Food is packed in newspapers in India. So it goes to these kind of use, and then it comes back to your own household, and then it goes to dustbin, and from the dustbin it reaches landfills, or they're incinerated. So this is a life cycle of a printed product. So in each and every area of the life cycle, we are affecting the environment. How are we doing it? Right, now let's talk about water. What we do, or let's say, how do we affect water? Now first let's talk about paper manufacturing. I'm sure you all appreciate that paper manufacturing industry is one of the most polluting industry. You just compare the sheer volume of water that we use. On an average, Indian paper mills, they use somewhere between 80,000 liters to 100,000 liters of water, unrecoverable fresh water, to manufacture just 1 ton of newsprint. Remember, this is very huge, right? Use 80,000 liters to 100,000 liters of water to manufacture just 1 ton of newsprint. Now, I'll give you an example. Now, take your home. How much water do you consume in your home? 1,000 liters a day? Then that's even on the higher side. So what we are talking about is whatever water that you consume for a period of 3 months in your home is used for manufacturing just 1 ton of newsprint. Just the 2 reels that comes into your printing plant use 3 months of water that you consume in your home. Now all these are unrecoverable water, which means, let's say, where do you use water? You use water for pulp making, which means water has a lot of lignin present in the water. Then water is used in bleaching units, so a lot of chemicals are present in the water. And finally, water is used during paper manufacturing, so a lot of loose fibers are present in the water. So there are a lot of pollutants. There are organic pollutants as well as inorganic pollutants. So these are treated and then it's left in the drain. So paper manufacturing is one of the most polluting industries that you can come across. And secondly, where else do you use water? Use water for dampening solution in your printing plant, right? Dampening solution. Use water for cleaning your plates, right? Use water for cleaning your plates, and I think that's it. So you use a lot of water. And also, when you store all these hazardous chemicals, inks, etc., sometimes in most of the printing plants I've seen, they're all stored in outdoors, right, in open sunlight. When you store there, even if there is a chance of a leak, a small leak, and then if it rains, you can assume that the entire stormwater drain is going to get polluted. For example, take 1 liter of water, right? 1 liter of water in a water bottle. If I drop just 1 drop of petrol in the water bottle, can we drink that water? We cannot, right? Because even a single drop of oil or petrol or the cleaning chemicals that we use in the press is sufficient to pollute 1 liter of water. So even a small leak from a container that is stored in the outdoor is sufficient to pollute your entire stormwater drain. So we are interacting with water, and then we are affecting the water bodies around us. So printing affects water bodies. Now let's talk about the air. During paper manufacturing, we use a lot of fuel, right? A lot of heat is required during paper manufacturing. You would have heard about thermomechanical pulping, where a lot of heat is required for pulping operation. And then bleaching. When you bleach, the pulp is heated to 80 to 90 degrees Celsius, otherwise you cannot bleach it. So you need a lot of heat during paper manufacturing. And then for drying the paper, right? You need to press out all the water that is present in the paper, dry it before it can be rolled over into reels. So a lot of heat is used, and to produce this heat, a lot of fuel is used. When you burn fuel, then you emit a lot of sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, carbon dioxide, etc. So a lot of air, lot of pollutants are released into atmosphere. And then you are transporting this paper through trucks or ships to your printing plant, and again you are using fuel. It means you are emitting nitrous oxides, NOx, we say NOx, SOx, carbon dioxide, etc. And then it comes to a printing plant, right? When it comes to a printing plant, there again you are burning fuel for your digital, DG sets. So it means you are also emitting all these pollutants. And then your raw materials like inks, chemicals, plate, etc., everything has to be transported. So again you are using fuel, so a lot of air pollution is happening. Then for distribution, again there is a lot of pollution. And if it is landfilled at the end use, then you know when organic compounds are filled in the land, it emits methane. So again you are polluting the atmosphere. So throughout the life cycle, a lot of air polluting components are released. Right. Now we talk about energy. So again, paper manufacturing is one of the most energy intensive process that you can come across. The energy used by paper manufacturing is comparable to the energy that is being used in, let's say, petrochemical industries or cement manufacturing industries or heavy metal manufacturing industries. So it's nearly equal to these kind of industries. So paper manufacturing is the most energy intensive, is one of the most energy intensive processes that you can come across. I'll just give an example. To manufacture 1 ton of thermomechanical pulp, you need at least 2000 to 2200 units of electricity. That's huge. And to manufacture 1 ton of paper, right, 1 ton of paper that releases your printing plant, a paper manufacturing industry consumes somewhere between 1400 to 1600 units of electricity. That's a huge energy consumption. Just compare it with your own household. How much energy do you use every month? Right? For example, in my home, where there are 4 people living in my home, I consume somewhere between 400 to 450 units of electricity for 2 months. Right? For 2 months. So when I talk about 1600 units of electricity to manufacture 1 ton of newsprint, it is 8 months of power consumption in my home that goes into manufacturing just 2 reels that lands in your printing plant. Or if you have a double width machine, it's just 1 reel that lands in your printing plant, and it consumes 8 months of electricity that is used in a normal middle class home, I'd say. So it's a very energy intensive process. But luckily, when we talk about recycled newsprint, to manufacture pulp from waste papers, it requires only 400 units of electricity approximately to manufacture 1 ton of pulp. So if you use recycled paper, then you are causing less impact on the environment, right? So that's how energy intensive the paper manufacturing is. And then all the fuel are also energy. And then in your printing plant, you use a lot of energy, right? Energy to run your printing plants, printing presses, energy to operate your CTPs, a lot of power consumption is there. And then when you talk in raw material section, we can take the example of printing plates. Right? The aluminum extraction is also a very energy intensive process. So aluminum extraction is a very energy intensive process. So plate manufacturing itself is a very energy intensive process. So printing process, we consume a lot of energy. Right, now we talked about what are the environmental impacts. Now let's talk about how to reduce these environmental impacts. One, purchase the responsibility. So when it comes to responsible purchase, the main raw material that we are going to talk about is our newsprint. Right, earlier we said there is a perception among people that the paper manufacturing is directly associated with deforestation. Right, that's what Abhishek Bachchan told in his advertisement. But most of the newsprints that we consume, most of the imported newsprints that we consume, the source of the pulp, right, it comes from certified forests. What is a certified forest? There are companies like FSC, there is a Forest Stewardship Council, and there is a company called PEFC. So these companies, they are independent organizations that certify forests. Right, you can read about them in their websites. So these companies certify forests. So they visit forests and then check whether the forest is renewable, which means the forest should have sustainable harvesting methodologies. For example, whenever you cut trees, you plant more number of saplings so that the forest cover is never reduced. So these forests are owned by individuals, and they have to maintain sustainable harvest levels. They have to make sure that the habitats, like the animals living in the forest, are not driven off, right? They are still living there. So they make sure that all these forests have sustainable level of harvesting. That's the key point, sustainable level of harvesting. And once they find that they have sustainable level of harvesting, then they certify these forests. And if your paper manufacturer takes wood from certified forest, then it means that your paper manufacturer is not reducing the forest cover. We are not cutting trees from forests, right? We are not cutting trees from forests, but it comes from certified forest where the harvest levels are sustainable. So when you purchase newsprint, you select those manufacturers who has these certifications. And when you sometimes you can find in the newsprint reel some of the imported reels like UPM, Stora Enso, etc. You can find that these reels have these FSC or PEFC certified symbols in that. So you have to buy from such a source. Then I'm going to show you an example where one of the paper manufacturer has published the environmental impact that they are causing when manufacturing a newsprint. So this is from UPM, and this document is called as a paper profile. Right? It is a voluntary declaration. There is no rule that a paper manufacturer has to publish this, but it is a voluntary declaration. And in this document, you can find that it is it's from UPM, and the mill is Rama PM1. Here you can see how much amount of sulfur dioxide is emitted during manufacture. It says 0.17 kilograms per ton, NOx 0.76 kilogram per ton, and carbon dioxide during burning fossil fuel is 90 kilogram per ton. We say they use 1370 kilowatt hour, that is 1370 units to manufacture 1 ton of newsprint. And see, it's very high, but you can't help it. That's how paper industry works. In the next page, you can find that the total emission is 440 kilograms per ton of newsprint produced. So 440 kilograms of carbon dioxide is emitted to produce this particular newsprint. Sorry, it's a LWC paper. So 440 kilograms of carbon dioxide is emitted to manufacture 1 ton of lightweight coated paper from UPM community. So this is an example for a paper profile. So you can look for paper manufacturers who has declared this voluntarily, and you can select paper based upon the total carbon dioxide emitted per ton of newsprint produced. Lower the emission, better is the environmental, lower is the environmental impact. Next comes hazardous waste management. These are pictures taken in printing plants. Some pictures are taken in India, some pictures are taken in abroad also. You can see, this picture is area where you clean rollers for, the CTP processors. So it's highly polluted. And in the right picture, you can find that there is no proper waste segregation mechanism. So both the hazardous and non-hazardous waste like this wooden planks, and hazardous waste like the ink drums, they're all discarded together, right? That's something we shouldn't do. So it has to be improved. Here there is another example where hazardous and non-hazardous materials are mixed together and then stored. And this is an example for good hazardous waste management. So you have separate areas to store hazardous and non-hazardous waste materials. So you can see there is a separate bin to put all ink containers. There is a separate bin to put your tube lights, etc. Right? This is about hazardous waste management. So we talked about two important points. One, purchase with responsibility. Number two, manage your waste. And number three, provide secure storage. Now, storage is very important because any accident that happens in your storage area can have a huge financial and huge environmental impact. Now here you can see all the waste cans and then the drums with chemicals. Here everything is stored in a unprofessional and in unorganized way. This is something we shouldn't do. Second picture, you can also find that it's not stored properly. And in the third picture, you can find that the chemicals are stored near newsprint reels. It is not secure. Any accident can be catastrophic here. This is an excellent picture. Here you can see some chemicals are stored in the outdoors near a stormwater drain. You can see that there is a small leakage that has happened from this storage can and it has reached the stormwater drain. You can see the close-up picture of that. You can see that the area around the stormwater drain are pink in color. So it is polluted with the chemical. So as I mentioned earlier, even one drop of chemical is sufficient to pollute the entire stormwater drain. And you can imagine how much pollution this would have caused. So these are some examples for good storage area. Provide raised platforms, and so you can also produce enclosed area for your chemicals to store. So in case of any accident, it will make sure that the effect doesn't spread to the nearby areas. Right, provide secure storage, and finally you have to monitor your consumption and reduce the waste. How do we do it? Here WAN-IFRA would like to propose 10 simple and easy to measure environmental key performance indexes. So here there are 10 KPIs that you can use to measure your consumption, monitor it over a period of time, and then reduce your wastage and that way reduce your consumption. So what are the KPIs? One, energy efficiency. How much units of electricity you consume to produce 1 ton of printed products. Paper efficiency. What is the percentage of waste that you generate? Water consumption. How much water you consume to process 1 square meter of your printing plate. Developer consumption. How much developer you consume to manufacture 1 meter square of plate. Ink consumption. How much ink you consume to manufacture 1 ton of printed product. Washing solvent, similarly. Dampening solution, cardboard packing, polyethylene films, how much you use per ton of printed product produced. And finally, important, how much liquid waste that you generate to manufacture per ton of printed products. So these are the 10 KPIs that you can easily measure from a printing plant. And once you measure, it is very easy to benchmark it or compare it between your different printing plants, then to find out which printing plant is best in a certain parameter, which printing plant is the worst. And once you find out that, you can easily pass on the best practices that is followed in the best printing plant to all the printing plants to make sure that all the printing plants are in the same platform. And it's a very useful tool. I'm giving an example of how you can use this environmental KPIs. Now in the chart you can find it is a real data from a newspaper industry that has 12 from a company that has 12 printing plants, and we have compared the developer and replenisher consumption across the 12 printing plants. You can see it is a developer and replenisher consumption in ml per meter square, right? Per meter square. So it is linearized to meter square, and it is put in a bar chart. You can find that one of the printing plant had the highest consumption. Right? I have marked it with the red circle. So this particular printing plant has the highest consumption compared to other printing plant. So you can easily assume that there is something wrong in this printing plant, so they are consuming a lot of chemicals. So it is very easy to find out which printing plant produces the highest consumption, which printing plant has the lowest consumption, and then you can easily transfer the best practices followed in one printing plant, or you can say the best printing plant, and transfer it to all the printing plants. And you can do an internal benchmark with all the data. And WAN-IFRA, what we are planning is that we are going to organize an external benchmarking with other newspapers. We are doing a project where we are collecting the KPI data from several printing plants, and then we'll have a database without identifying the names, a database which you can access and you can compare your consumption with the consumption of other printing plants in other companies as well. So this is something we are planning to do in the near future. And next we come to the carbon footprint. Right now, this is an important topic. Now, what we discussed. Now, let's do a short recap of what we did till now. We discussed why green initiatives are necessary. What is the necessity in today's industrial requirements, the global requirements, why it is necessary. And secondly, we saw how we are affecting the environment. And third, we saw how some methods where we can ensure that we reduce our impact on the environment. Now we are going to see what is the carbon footprint of a printing plant. How much carbon dioxide that we emit in the atmosphere to produce our printed products. And why it is important? I'm sure you would have read about greenhouse gases. Now, in the initial slide, we discussed about the temperature increase in the the world's temperature increase, and this temperature increase, the main reason is the emission of greenhouse gases. And the most important or most widely abundant greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide. Other gases, for example, are methane, nitrous oxides, water vapor, carbon fluorocarbons, etc. So this greenhouse gases has over the past 200 years, right, from the pre-industrial era, right from the middle of the 17th century, slowly the carbon dioxide has accumulated and the other greenhouse gases are accumulated in the environment, and right now there are abundant of greenhouse gases that is increasing our temperature. So if you want to calculate how much carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere through industrial activity, all a government has to do is to ask each and every industry to submit their carbon dioxide emission figures. And once you collect all the carbon dioxide emission figures, you add it together, then you know how much carbon dioxide is emitted by industries in India. So it's very important to calculate our carbon dioxide emission. It can become a necessity in the future as well. So how much carbon dioxide do we emit to produce our newsprint products? Before we go into the figures, we need to know how this carbon dioxide is calculated, how the carbon footprint is calculated. So the carbon dioxide emitted from industries is divided into three categories: Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Scope 1 is direct emissions. In your printing plant, whatever emission that you do directly into the atmosphere comes under Scope 1. For example, when you burn fuel in your DG sets and you emit the gases, the exhaust gases into the atmosphere, then that is your direct emission. Other example, let's say you have a company-owned car and you buy fuel for the car, and whatever exhaust that comes out of the car comes under your direct emissions. That is Scope 1. Scope 2 is energy that you use. When you manufacture energy, right? Let's take, for example, if your electricity comes from a coal-based thermal plant, then a lot of emission is made when the coal is burnt to produce electricity, and that comes under Scope 2. It's an indirect emission, but it is very significant because the energy that is generated in the power plant is a necessity for you to run your printing plant. So it is comes under Scope 2, but it's very, very crucial for your carbon calculation. The next is the Scope 3. So all the raw materials, right? We talked about the paper manufacturing industry spending a lot of energy. So this comes under your Scope 3. Here, you are not doing this emission, but the paper manufacturing industry is doing, but he is doing it because he wants to produce product to cater to your need. So that comes under Scope 3. So all the raw materials and the emission during raw materials comes under manufacture of raw materials comes under Scope 3. Now any industry, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to calculate the emissions of the entire country, then all you have to do is you have to provide only your Scope 1 and Scope 2 data. Forget about your Scope 3 data. You have to produce only your Scope 1 and Scope 2 data. Your paper manufacturer, when he submits his report, whatever that comes under Scope 3 for you, it comes under Scope 1 for the paper manufacturer, right? Because he is emitting directly to the atmosphere. So all the industries have to do is submit only their Scope 1 and Scope 2 data, forget about Scope 3 data, and then when you add the carbon emission of all the industries, then you will get the entire emission of the country. Right. But here, when we calculate the carbon footprint of the printing plant, now let's forget about the Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Let's calculate all the carbon emissions, including Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, to get a clear idea of what is the environmental impact of the printing industry. So basically, what we do is we measure how much fuel you consume, you burn in your industry. What is the fuel burnt in company-owned vehicles? How much energy you purchase? How your employees commute? That is also important. For example, if you have a let's say a company vehicle that is used by all your staff. Let's say you do a carpooling. then your emission is far lesser than comparing to all employees traveling by their own car, right? So employee commuting is a crucial factor. So these are company related. When it comes to raw material related, production of newsprint, production of plates, production of inks and varnishes, production of all your chemicals, production of packaging materials, transportation of raw materials, and transportation of finished products. So there are totally 7 plus 4, 11 parameters that we have to measure. We have to calculate the carbon dioxide emission by your company. So it includes all the 3 scopes. So here are some examples. These are real examples that we calculated from printing plants in India. So I can say that the carbon emission ranges from 1,700 kilograms to 2,600 kilograms of carbon dioxide per ton of products produced. So to produce 1 ton of printed products, right? To produce 1 ton of your newspaper copies, you consume somewhere between 1,700 kilograms. Sorry, you emit somewhere around 1,700 kilograms to 2,600 kilograms of carbon dioxide. So in the chart you can find that the major contribution comes from production of paper. The next is electricity, then transportation of raw materials, production of inks, production of plates, transportation of products to consumers, and the employee commuting. So these are the 7 key parameters that produces the highest emissions. So production of paper, it's it's very obvious, and then comes the production of electricity. But here you can find that one company had that electricity accounted to 18% of the total emissions, but in another company electricity amounted only to 3% of total emissions. So there is a significant difference. Why is that significant difference? So the difference comes from different parameters. One, what brand of newsprint that you use. So the efficiency of the newsprint mill. As we saw in the example earlier, in case of UPM, they emitted 440 kilograms of carbon dioxide to produce 1 ton. But there can be another newsprint mill that can emit some even up to 1,000 kilograms of 1,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide to emit to produce 1 ton of newsprint samples. So the efficiency of paper mill is crucial. So from whom you buy the newsprint sample is very important. Which country the newsprint is from. So what is the distance between your printing plant and the newsprint mill? That is also very crucial. If you are importing newsprint, the newsprint has to travel a long distance, right? It has to travel by ships across the ocean. It has to come to a port, and from the port it has to be transported via trucks to your printing plant. So the carbon footprint can be quite high compared to Indian mill, which is lying closer to your printing plant. But if you are transporting Indian paper mill over a distance of say 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers, then it doesn't make sense. It again is going to increase your carbon footprint. Then what type of electricity do you use? Whether the electricity comes from renewable source or from a non-renewable source. How much fuel you burn in your printing plant. For example, if your printing plant runs entirely out of electricity generated from DG sets, then your carbon footprint can be quite high, right, compared to using electricity from a grid. And if you are using a heat set process, then you are additionally burning LPG gas to dry your inks, then again it's quite high. The carbon footprint is quite high. Then how much waste you generate. More waste you generate, it means more raw materials you consume, then your carbon footprint is very high. And finally, how does your employees commute? As I mentioned earlier, if you have a carpooling facility, then your carbon footprint is quite lower compared usually in their own vehicles. And again, importantly, when you talk about energy, I'm referring to this example where one company has 18% of carbon footprint from electricity, and another company has only only 3% of carbon footprint from electricity. Now the differences can be like this. For example, the publishers of the Hindu newspaper, in 2012, they invested in wind power in South Tamil Nadu, and this wind power plant is reducing their emission by 12,000 tons of carbon dioxide per year. That's a huge number. So they produce a lot of electricity, and thereby they are reducing their carbon emission by 12,000 tons per year. So if you take the state of Kerala, for example, in Kerala, the majority of electricity produced is from is hydro. And then there are a lot of rivers and then a lot of dams, so they produce a lot of hydroelectric power. And when you take hydroelectric power, to produce 1 unit of hydroelectric power, you don't emit any carbon dioxide at all. So it is zero emissions compared to an Indian average of 0.83 kilograms of carbon dioxide per unit of electricity produced. So that will create a major difference. So if you buy electricity from a thermal power plant, your carbon emission is somewhere around on an average 0.83 kilograms per unit. But if you buy it from a windmill or from a hydroelectric power plant, then your emission is zero. So that's significant. So we need to see whether there is a scope to invest, for your company to invest in hydroelectric power or in wind electric power. I'll show you an example. How much carbon dioxide is emitted by an advertiser when he advertises with you. Taking this example of Volkswagen, this particular newspaper prints 320,000 copies per day, and the total number of pages is 20 pages per edition. And the size of Volkswagen advertisement is 0.4 pages, which is 40% of one full page. This 0.4 page, which works out to 2% of the entire, in terms of space, in terms of area. This Volkswagen advertisement, it takes up 2% of the entire copy. And we calculated the carbon footprint for this one particular edition. We found that to produce this one particular edition, this publisher has emitted 70,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide, 70 tons of carbon dioxide for this one particular edition. And the contribution of Volkswagen advertisement is somewhere around 1,400 kilograms. Why is it important? If you go to Volkswagen's website, you can find that Volkswagen has a separate website dedicated for their corporate social responsibility. It's a thick blue. And if you go to their website, they talk more about this carbon footprint. They even have a carbon footprint calculator in their website. So when such an advertiser who is very concerned about the environment advertises with you, then he may expect that he wants to advertise with a newspaper who has a lower carbon footprint. It can be possible. Maybe it is not the case today, but in the future it can become a case. And you can find many of your advertisers, many of your national advertisers, FMCG companies, automobile companies. If you go to their website, you can find that they are very, very concerned about environment. They have a separate website for the corporate social responsibility. So these companies, they would like to advertise more with a printing company who is also concerned about the environment and who also has an environmental program to reduce their carbon footprint. So if you take green initiatives today, then you can give necessary materials to your advertising department and make sure that your advertisement department pass over this information to all the advertisers and make sure that those advertisers who are very keen on environmental protection come back and advertise with your newspaper. So this can be a very good marketing tool in the future. And as I also mentioned to you earlier, the SEBI regulation that says the top 100 companies should come out with their CSR report. Then these top 100 companies, if they are your advertisers, then they may require this data. they may require how much carbon dioxide they have emitted through their advertisements. So they may want this kind of data, and if you have this kind of data, this can also become a marketing tool for you to approach these companies and say, see, I have done our calculations, I'm one of the lowest in the world, and you have to, there is a good reason for you to advertise with us. Your advertising department can go and talk to advertisers. So there are a lot of money to be made by taking these green initiatives. And secondly, all the EKPIs that I mentioned, right? When you do the internal benchmark and external benchmark, you can again find ways to reduce your raw material consumption, and in turn, you're going to have a lot of savings. Now I'm going to give a short introduction about a Grow Green project that WAN-IFRA does. WAN-IFRA launched the Grow Green project in the year 2013, and it's a global initiative to reduce the environmental impact of newspapers. The main objective is to find areas in a printing plant that cause significant environmental impact, thereby address the impact and then save cost and then sell advertisement better. These 2 points I explained earlier. So how you can save cost by reducing your raw materials, how you can sell better by approaching all companies with your environmental initiatives. And you can also address the growing environmental awareness among your customers by taking up such a project. You can also importantly anticipate future regulations. And when you take green initiatives today, you'll know what are the environmental regulations that can come up in the future. That way you can optimize investments. The project, what are the objectives? We aim to analyze the environmental impact of your printing plant. What is your impact on the air quality? What is the impact on water quality? What is the impact on soil and noise? And which areas cause significant impact? Then we also evaluate your carbon footprint and measure the environmental key performance indices. We also do a benchmark for you, an internal benchmark for you. And then finally, importantly, identify projects that will reduce your environmental impact, thereby save cost to your company. This is a brief project structure. We do a one-day startup workshop. Then we do a one-day environmental audit where we go to each and every area of operation in your printing plant and find areas which cause significant environmental impact. And then on the third day, we do a carbon footprint calculation of your company. And then after a day's break, we present a report on what are the areas that is causing significant impacts, how you can reduce it. You'll identify the projects for you that can save cost as well as your environmental impact. This is a carbon footprint calculator that we use. It is developed jointly by the Graphic Associations of Belgium, France, Denmark, Finland, Netherlands, Norway, and UK. It's a very popular tool that we use. And these are the projects that we have completed till date. We did a project for the Hindu newspaper in 2013, and in 2014 we did a project for Times of India. We did 2 projects for Malayalam Manorama, and we did 2 projects for Mathrubhumi. So this project basically aims to analyze your environmental impact and then find projects to reduce your environmental impact and also save your cost. Thank you so much for attending the webinar. Now I give it to Selva Prabhu for any questions.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you for the questions. Okay, so we have 2 questions from the participant. One is like from Mr. Bir Bahadur. The question like, how can we have a company-related cost by reducing the carbon footprint using the costly, totally chlorine-free pulp paper? And also there's a second question from him. We have used the recycled paper so that also save the carbon footprint. How much we have reduced the carbon footprint or save the tree by saving the 1 metric ton recycled newsprint? So I'll just pass it over to Anand and
Okay. Mr. B. Bahadur. The first question about total chlorine-free pulp. Is chlorine-free pulp, where we use chlorine? If you see where we use chlorine in paper manufacturing, we use chlorine during the bleaching process. Right? The chlorine is used to remove, to acidify the lignin that is present in the pulp, and then later we can remove the acidified lignin in a different process. So chlorine is used basically for the bleaching process of newsprint manufacturing. But the point is, even if there is any savings that has to be made with the help of this total chlorine-free pulp, I basically understand that if you remove the chlorine from equation, you save cost on the chlorine. That's it, right? But the problem is, even if there is any cost saving that is involved, it is only be realized by the paper manufacturing industry and never by the printing plant. I'm sure you would agree that if there is a cost saving that is going to be achieved by removing chlorine out of equation, the cost saving will go only to the paper manufacturer, and it will not come to the printing plant. That's the first question. For the second question, how much we have reduced the carbon footprint? As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to carbon footprint, comparing to a recycled pulp and a virgin pulp, the key difference is a pulping process. And when it comes to the pulping process, you can see that to produce 1 ton of thermomechanical pulp, you are consuming somewhere around 2000 units of electricity. And to produce a recycled pulp, you are consuming somewhere around 400 units of electricity. So there is a difference of 1600 units, and that will directly convert into reduction in carbon footprint. Right, 1600 units, and to manufacture 1 unit of electricity, I mentioned the Indian average is 0.83 kilograms of carbon dioxide. So 1600 units, if you calculate, there is a lot of carbon footprint to be reduced. So if you use recycled newsprint, then obviously you are reducing your carbon footprint compared to using virgin newsprint. But to calculate your carbon footprint, your paper manufacturer has to provide you what is their carbon profile, how much carbon dioxide they are emitting to produce 1 ton of newsprint. But I'm afraid Indian mills does not have this kind of analysis done. But many of the imported papers you can get such an analysis, but Indian paper I really doubt. We don't have such an analysis from Indian newsprint mills, but we can ask them to do an analysis for us. But obviously when you use recycled paper, your carbon footprint is reduced, mainly because of lower electricity consumption to make recycled pulp. And saving of trees, of course, to manufacture thermomechanical pulp, it comes from 100% wood, but recycled pulp comes entirely from recycled paper, so you are not cutting down any tree for that, so obviously you are saving trees. Okay, Selva.
thank you, Anand. Thank you for the detailed answer. And so thank you, participants. Hope the webinar was useful and gave you a very good understanding of green publishing and how to implement in your organization. And hope you are aware about our annual conference in Delhi on 17th and 18th September, wherein we have a specific session on printing plants and their environmental impact. So you'll have more case studies during the conference, and look forward to see you there. And thank you again. And the next webinar will be on September 2nd, and look forward to again meet you virtually. So at the end of the webinar, there will be a feedback for your Persuel. So kindly give your feedback with respect to the webinar so that we can improve our services. And Thank you, and good evening.